This is a quick follow-up video to the portable garage air conditioner video I shot a while back. I received a number of good suggestions in the comments and thought I'd give them a shot and see what kind of results they produced. One of the things that was mentioned was about security. With the door unlocked from the track, from the opener, there's nothing preventing it from just being opened by hand. There's nothing about the outlet area that's securing it. And I have the pretty standard slide locks there, which when it's sitting up on its port there, obviously the lock isn't aligned with the hole. So what I've done here is just taken a regular old lock and put it in the way of the door. So that'll keep anybody from lifting the door, because the lock will interfere with the wheel going past. Another suggestion I received was about circulating the air. So this unit definitely produces quite a bit of cold air, but it doesn't project it particularly well in this large space. So I have it over here on this empty garage bay, and my work area is over there, and yeah, it cools things down, but at no point do you really get the benefit of coolness coming from the movement of air. So I put a fan over there, and I've tried it out, and it definitely makes a difference to push some of that cool air over to the other side of the garage. So for example, without the fan, even standing here, I wouldn't feel any flow of cold air coming off of this. It's more or less just putting it straight out front. But with the fan blowing across it, it pushes the cold air over more into the work area. So not a dramatic difference, but worthwhile to just help circulate the cold air a little bit better. Before I introduce what I think will be the most significant change, a quick recap of how I set all this up in the original configuration and changes that I've made since then. I showed a minute ago how I get the air out of the garage. And around the gaps that are created by the door being lifted slightly, I use this foil insulation. Over here on the side, that's how it was originally configured. That's working well. Up on the top, it's the same, no change here. Using Velcro and this foil, a nice snug fit. But one minor change I made is this gap that is created in the door itself. I originally had a Velcroed piece with Velcro that was semi-permanently on the door, and another one of the foil strips with Velcro on it to attach to that to cover this gap. And the issue I was having with that is the Velcro that should stay up on the door just wasn't sticking very well on this kind of enamel type finish on the door. The adhesive just wasn't doing its job. So I got rid of the foil piece for this particular spot, and I'm just going to go with the painter's tape to cover that, to keep the air from flowing in there. It's super easy to put a fresh piece of tape in that spot each time. So the biggest change I've made is, in terms of trying to get the overall temperature down lower than the original configuration, is trying this insulation on the exhaust port. So I'll show a little bit about how I prepared that and initially what results it's producing right on the surface. So what I've done is taken some of the leftover insulation that I used around the door to cover the gaps. Took some leftover pieces of that and just made a removable insulation piece on what'll be on the top. It's doubled up thickness, and then some Velcro strips. Wrap that around the one exhaust tube and see if I can cut down on some of the heat that's being radiated back into the room off of that. This particular model of portable air conditioner has two tubes off the back of it, but only the closer one is actually venting hot air. So uncovered, we'll take a couple readings to see how hot the surface is of this tube. 109.6, down here where it's spread out a little bit more. 122.7, up here closer to the outlet. 121, so about 120 degrees across the surface of this exhaust tube. Here's a look at that exhaust insulation in place. Pretty good fit, nice and snug. So take a couple readings here. Before, without the insulation, it was reading in the low 120s in a couple spots along this tube. So let's take a look. Now that this has been running for several minutes, 91.4, 91.8, 93. So almost 30 degrees change by putting this on. Just for kicks, let's see what the non-exhaust, so 95, which is about the outside air temperature. Nothing's really going on in that tube, so it's just the equivalent of the outside air, but pretty big change, drop in temperature on the exhaust side. So the insulation is producing as much as a 30-degree drop on the surface of that exhaust tube. But now I want to see what it does in terms of, will it really allow the air conditioner to get the garage down to a lower temperature by not having that heat radiating back in. It's a pretty similar day in terms of weather and garage conditions as to when I shot that video. Summertime, high humidity, high heat, low 90s out. So very similar conditions to see apples to apples if we get a better outcome by pushing all that heat out as opposed to radiating it back into the garage. All right, here's where we're at to start this test. 90 degrees. Gonna let it run for a few hours, checking on it about every 30 minutes and see if we can get it below what we had before. First checkpoint on the progress, 30 minutes. It's 88 degrees now in here. So that's a 2-degree decrease in that time. All right, 60-minute update, another 2 degrees gained. So we're now at 86. We'll let it run for another hour, see what additional improvement is made. All right, final check for today. It's been about 2 hours, and like the original video, I've gained about 6 to 7 degrees reduction in the temperature in the garage. This is toggling between 84 and 83, so it's about 6-7 degrees from where we started. So I would say at this point the insulation on the exhaust tube has not created a dramatic difference, but like I did with the first video, here in this trial I started the air conditioner after the garage is already at the max heat for the day. So like the first video, I'm gonna test it again tomorrow and get it going before the heat builds in here and see if it can get a lower temperature than the previous video and see if it can sustain that temperature as the day heats up. So one more check tomorrow, and then we'll have a final conclusion on any benefit from the insulation. All right, final update. It's the next day, and I started the AC this morning and have let it run for a couple hours. When it started, it was at 84 degrees in here, and we're now showing as 77. So that's a 7-degree improvement with the insulation on the exhaust tube, and that's a couple degrees better than what I was able to achieve as a net cooling, net decrease in the temperature before the insulation. That was 5 in the last video, starting in the morning. Here, got a couple extra degrees for a 7-degree improvement. So small change, but given that this took no time and no expense since it was a leftover piece of insulation, I think it was worthwhile. The biggest factor here, I think, is, yeah, this insulation is eliminating any heat radiated off of that tube, but it's small in comparison to what's coming off the garage doors. And they're 120, 130 degrees, so much more surface area radiating the heat back into the garage versus the small exhaust tube. So it was worthwhile, and maybe it'll just make the system run a little bit less, but a small improvement there. So to recap, the changes I made in this go round were using the cheap box fan just to circulate the air a little bit better throughout the full space of the garage. I'd call that a positive outcome. Adding a little security by way of just putting a lock through the track to prevent the door from being lifted up. It blocks the wheel. That's a worthwhile change. And then the insulation on the tube, like I said, a small improvement, but it didn't really cost anything. Again, It's going to take covering these doors with some sort of insulation to see any meaningful change, and that's beyond the time and expense I want to put into it. Overall, I'm quite satisfied with the outcome of both the air conditioner itself and some of the small changes I've made here in this video. Can't really get it below 77 degrees, so it's not exactly cold in the garage, but it really cuts down on the humidity. And so with the addition of some circulating air and reduced humidity and getting it into the upper 70s, it's quite pleasant to work in here, far better than the 90 degrees it would be otherwise. So I think this is the setup I'm going to stick with for now. It only takes about 15 minutes to get things set up, and most of that is positioning the Velcro to seal off the gaps in the doors. So pretty pleased with the outcome. Thanks for watching, and thanks to those of you that suggested some changes that I've implemented here. Have a great day.